Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for joining us on Real Talk with Keith Smith, live in our studio in downtown Charlottesville on the I Love CVille Network on a show today presented by Yes Realty Partners, a name you can trust. Yes Realty Partners online at yesrealtypartners.com. They will help you with the buying and selling of real estate across Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia. Today's show is an anticipated program. We have been promoting the show for about a week now on the I Love CVille Network. Fred Missel and Scott Smith are in the house. The only contested election in Albemarle County, ladies and gentlemen, in the Samuel Miller District. A lot of topics, trends, and storylines in Albemarle County as housing affordability continues to be front and center. A lot of other storylines that we're going to cover as well: bicycle and pedestrian safety, safety for a community at large, taxpayers feeling the pinch, especially as it applies to real estate assessments. So much to cover in the year 2025 as this community, Albemarle County, has radically changed post-COVID. Those topics and more on a show that live streams on every social media platform possible, a show that welcomes you, the viewer and listener, to ask questions and shape the discussion. Judah Wickhauer, studio camera, please, and let's go to a four-shot as we welcome Keith Smith, Scott Smith, and Fred Missel to the Friday edition of Real Talk with Keith Smith.
We need to get this out in the front. No relation, right?
That's right. Well, maybe somewhere.
We didn't do our 23andMe yet. So
no, not yet.
We might be related in some way. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this. As we were saying in the intro, you know, this is just a couple of guys having a cup of coffee, talking about what we love the most in this region. In this show, it's around real estate. You know, Jerry kind of kicked off a little bit, but I want to kind of set the frame on real estate real quick, and then we'll let you two guys introduce yourself. But I'm going to go ahead and get this data out there first, and then you guys can introduce yourself. So Jerry was talking about the last couple of years, but I went back and looked at 2019, which was pre-COVID, Albemarle County, and now year to date on that, what has sold, you know, so forth and so on. So interesting, we're down about 25% in volume. So we've sold 25% less homes today than we did in 2019.
Annualized?
But, excuse me?
Annualized?
It is annualized, yes.
Okay.
So thank you. But the median sales price is up 49.6, let's call it 50%. It jumped from 380 in 2019 to 568 right now at this particular point. And one other just quick little thing to throw out there: of the sales of 2025, only about a third of them were under $400,000. Mm-hmm. So again, housing, we're going to kind of talk about this stuff. But if you don't mind, I'm going to let Fred kick off first, and then you can introduce yourself, Scott.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate you guys having us. Scott, thank you, too, for running. Absolutely. I think having an opponent in this race is actually going to make the race better for the community. And, you know, just one of the ways it's better is by having these types of conversations. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I truly believe iron sharpens iron, and I think we can do that together. Moving forward, and regardless of the outcome of the race, I think that, you know, continued discussions like this are going to be invaluable to the community. So thanks for that. Yeah, so Fred Missel, and just one thing, Keith, just on following up on your comment there, the one interesting fact that you put next to the increase in housing costs is what we're seeing in terms of incomes. Yeah. And the incomes have not kept up with housing costs. And so that's one of the issues that I think we need to be thinking about is, you know, as we think about people trying to afford new homes and tax increases and efficiencies and so on, I think it's important to also think about what their incomes are doing and diversifying that. So Fred Missel, I've been here, in this area for almost 40 years. I was a student here at the University of Virginia, graduated in 1990. I started in my graduate school as an urban and environmental planning major, and determined that it was a great path and I really enjoyed it a lot, but I also wanted to look at working on physical environment and seeing an impact on the physical environment. So I pursued a landscape architecture master's degree in addition to the urban planning degree. Probably most importantly is I came here one day after I was married. So I married my undergrad sweetheart, and we met each other in freshman orientation, actually. and we've been together now over 42 years. And so she moved here. She's a nurse. She's now retired, and she supported me through 4 years of graduate school. In the fourth year, we had our first daughter, and she's remarkable. She was a D1 athlete also at the university in rowing, and she is married to a wonderful gentleman, and we have our first grandchild now, so we're excited. They're actually visiting this weekend. And then 3.5 years later, almost to the day, we had our second daughter, and she and her husband live here in Charlottesville. So it's been great to actually have them live close by. Done a lot in the community engagement. I don't want to just ramble to hear myself talk, but
We'll probably get into all of that stuff
we'll wait on
as
that.
we get into it. But we're going to give Scott a shot here.
sounds good.
Sure. So again, thank you guys both for the opportunity to be here. Thanks, Fred, for being here. I actually grew up in university communities around the U.S. and actually a little bit in Canada too. So, very much like Charlottesville, grew up in academic communities. It's interesting because of that. Some of my initial passion for government came out of my participation in Boys State, way back in the day, back in high school. Engineering degrees, undergrad and graduate degrees in engineering, specifically industrial. And I think the key part probably about that is it helps organizations operate more efficiently. We'll probably end up touching base on that a little bit. Multi-decade career in high-tech enterprise software, specifically around helping organizations become more efficient. We moved here, Nancy and I met, 36th, actually in our 36th year of marriage.
You need to get that right.
I know, that's what I was just thinking. I'm on air. I better be careful here. 1990, we got married. And so, anyway, 3 children. I've adopted, all the kids. It's pretty exciting. And moved here 5 years ago, fell in love with just a rural beauty, and I'm sure all of you can kind of attest to that. And so it's just a great opportunity. One of the things that comes up, I was just thinking back, like being an election official last year, that was, getting up at the crack of dawn, or actually before the crack of dawn and going out and doing it, or when we went down to Samaritan's Purse to help out with the hurricane victims and took supplies down there. And so anyway, lots of opportunities to participate in the community. Looking forward to the conversation today.
So I kind of started off with, because it's a housing show, right? It's a real estate show. When you have a third of the homes that are selling under $400,000.
Yeah.
For a little background, I also chair a couple of affordable housing nonprofits and kind of big in that space. So, and I'm just going to throw this out there. If elected, what can you do to help that number? Should we help it? Should we not? What's your guys, and just jump in, whoever wants to jump in first. What are your thoughts on that, on how we can move that needle forward? Anybody
So
want to
you're
jump?
talking about increasing affordability, essentially.
Yeah. I mean,
in homes less than
we had this
$400,000.
conversation before the cameras went live about the incomes, right?
Yeah.
We're at 125,
Yeah.
200 is the
125, 800.
800,
is
thank you.
HUD median family household income.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was last year, had a 200 and a handle in it. Yeah. So how do we reconcile that math?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, go ahead.
So some of you know I'm involved in 3 housing projects right now, and 2 of them are 100% affordable housing. And one is located in the city, one is located in the county, and then we have a third project that we're looking at, and we're targeting 30% AMI and below, area median income and below, as much as possible. And in working with the 2 developers that we've been partnering with, one is Piedmont Housing Alliance, one is Preservation of Affordable Housing out of Boston. It's been very clear that working in this locale, and they do work in others, not so much Piedmont, but definitely Preservation of Affordable Housing, the funding is just not there. And that funding, in large part, comes from the locality. And what I've realized is the benefit of local funding and what that can do to actually increase the ability for those developers to gain additional funding. So it's sometimes a 2-to-1 relationship, sometimes even better. And when that's not there, it's a huge gap, and it's a real challenge for them. So
So Scott, Fred, you're talking rentals, right? My numbers are more on the purchase side and the ownership side. So what's your thoughts on that as far as the 400,000 and how can we navigate that number?
There's some basic economics here, right? It's Adam Smith, invisible hand, right? In terms of supply and demand, that plays a big role in kind of what's going on. I know a young couple that recently purchased their first home, and they're both they're not entry-level wages, but they're not they're in the medical field, but they're not physicians or dentists or anything like that. So they chose to go over the hill. And purchase a property over there and just extend their commute, right? And you'd like to see them, being able to find something a little closer, right? But at the same time, you've got a lot of variables that are going on. Let's look at taxes, for example. I'd like to see the government operating, with some fiscal discipline and as being as disciplined as you can about how the money that we're spending. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, for improvement. And specifically, you were talking about, some of the housing. You've also, there's a huge increase in the value of those housing. It's not just taxes, it's the assessments. And so I've talked to people that have had 20, 30% raises in their assessments. So I'd like to see the government, operating with fiscal responsibility to help keep those costs down. And at the same time, we could look at opportunities, for more affordable housing.
So I hear that. I've been doing this for 40 years now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you think.
Yeah. You're the guest.
No questions.
I got a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
You said bust your chops.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did. I did. So how do you do that, right?
Right.
How do we actually do that? How do we actually adjust the budgets or adjust the taxing to get there? I'm a business guy. We're business guys. We tend to look at things from a business perspective. You're a developer, right? So you're going to look at these things from a developer's perspective. But how do you do that and then also kind of take care of everything else at the same time? Does that make any sense, that question?
Yeah, it does. If you look at like current budgets, and I'm not going to go into the weeds on it,
Sure.
but 40-year business person in the high-tech arena, probably the most transformative industry in the last 100 years, in terms of what we've been doing, and the changes that are coming up, not just in the past, but in the future, right? But back to your question, in terms of the budget, there are opportunities, there are surpluses that have been in there that are just getting, re-put back in, and you could leverage some of those funds to help keep some of these costs down. I have direct experience in terms of just the process of, simply as a homeowner building a deck and all the things that you had to go through with that. There's a gentleman over on Ivy Road that, was trying to put in a couple of bays on his garage, and it took him 7 or 8 years to kind of get through the process, right?
Well, we're gonna talk about red tape into green tape.
But anyway, I think there are definitely opportunities for greater efficiency and to kind of hold the line. Because what's going to happen? What's going to happen is if we keep going the direction that we're going, a lot of people in the working arena are going to get pushed out. Retired people, people that are kind of above the median, below the median income. There's a squeeze that's happening.
I can speak to that with some authority, but Fred, will you chime in?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Scott. I think what we have to look at is really specifically your question, Keith, which is how do we do that? And the how is the question. So if we're talking about funds, that's one way, right? It's finding capital ways to actually contribute so that the homeowner can reduce their costs. And that might be through taxes. That might be through using some of the reserve funds that the county is currently keeping for rainy days and re-looking at those and making sure that those are efficiently used, not overstated, but are in the right place. I think you also have to look at the homeowner, and you have to ask, what is it that's part of the capital stack to buying a house that's an introductory house in the area of $400,000 or below? And you have to look at things like land costs. And so land costs in the area are through the roof. And so if there are ways to help reduce land costs, potentially through having some partnership or a land trust that could assist with that, I think that's a really helpful way to do it.
We're going to let Jerry jump in, but I'm going to pick some of that apart. a little
Yeah,
bit.
please do.
I live in Ivy. I live within the Samuel Miller District. I've been in this community for 25 years. Started as a UVA student, then a married man, then father of two.
Awesome.
We are emotionally, financially, and personally invested in the Samuel Miller District and in Ivy, Virginia. One of my businesses is called I Love CVille. So what you guys are doing is not only paramount to my family and our future generations, but how we pay our mortgage and our bills.
Yeah.
From my standpoint, housing affordability is tied to supply and demand, and it's tied to an Albemarle County policy where 5% of the county is allocated to development. That 5% of the county is not fully developed, and the topography of that 5% suggests that not all the 5% can be developed. I'm going to ask both you guys a very pointed question because I'm a business person who looks at things through pointed lenses. Should the 5% developmental area be expanded, or do we wait to expand the 5% until full density is realistic or materializes in the development area we have today?
Yeah, it's a great question, one that comes up almost as often as how do you make housing affordable? And it's one I've thought a lot about, and it's one that's obviously near and dear not only to the county but also to the Samuel Miller District, and specifically because of the rural preservation focus. So I'll say a few things just off the bat. One is there's no direct answer. I'd like to be able to say I am 100% for not moving that boundary. But my answer is a little bit more nuanced, and that is in Albemarle County, within the development area, it's about 35, I think, square miles or so of the total 725,000 square miles. So it's 3 times the size of Charlottesville, the development area for the county. And what we've seen on the Planning Commission over the last several years, and even on the ARB, is that the amount of density that the comprehensive plan in its former form, before we're obviously redoing that now, the amount of land that is slated for development, if you take that as 100%, we're only realizing about 58% of that total land area for development. And there are a number of reasons for that, but I think those include topography, infrastructure, et cetera. So I think step number one, layer number one, is we have to essentially look at how well we're doing in the development area to create density and to unlock density in those areas. That's another tangent. We can talk about that a little bit later, but it has to do with comprehensive plans. It has to do with zoning ordinance, refresh and modernization, all of those types of
So
things.
not to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
you're basically saying the 5% is not fully optimized. Until the 5% is fully optimized for housing density, we should not expand the development area.
I would say that yes, is the case. And what I would also add to that is...
I agree with that.
I would add to that the perimeter, right?
Yeah.
The areas around the edge.
Yeah, or the first stage of expansion.
Exactly, and that's a
Yeah.
little bit of a gray area
Yeah.
for me right now. So I think
Because you don't want urban sprawl.
Correct. So yeah, I think that's the second layer, is the edges. And then, I think the third layer is what we're doing in the rural areas. And, we've talked about, we can talk more about that in a minute, but, I've got some ideas about that as well. So
Scott,
I'll
your
let
question.
Scott
The 5% development area, should it be expanded or not? As someone who votes in the Samuel Miller District, it's an opinion-based talk show. Expanding the development area, from my standpoint, would be an absolute mistake. I choose to live in Albemarle County because of quality of life, because of green, because of environmental. I don't want a Northern Virginia or Fredericksburg. That's my take. I'm curious of yours.
So your question actually reminds me of a conversation I had just like 2 weeks ago with one of the Samuel Miller constituents. Her name is Sarah, and we're sitting there talking, and I just knocked on her door, right? And just started talking to her, and the first thing she talked about was the preservation of, the rural nature, and we had a pretty lengthy conversation about it. Later, she asked about affordable housing for her children, okay? In the same conversation.
In the rural area?
She didn't say
Or
where.
just a general-
It was just
Yeah.
a general
But
conversation.
housing affordability and not expanding the development area can still coexist.
That's
Correct.
right. Yeah, so right now, in the development areas as they stand, there's still an opportunity for like 11,000-ish units to go in there, right? And so, I mean, the rural area is what attracted me here, willing to kind of look at it. But, in the conversations I'm having with people, they really want to preserve the rural areas. And so I am also interested in preserving the rural areas.
Okay, so we have that. Keith, I'll throw this to you. So both candidates here are not in favor of expanding the development area. Can we say that with confidence and conviction, fellas?
Yes.
Okay.
On my side, for sure.
Okay, so check for me on this, and I think check for a lot of folks out there. Maybe not so a check for Keith. I mean, the guy's over there getting a little antsy in his seat, if you can tell over there.
See you guys later.
Yeah, he wants it expanded. I absolutely do not. We're diametrically opposed on that.
And that's part of the fun of the show.
Yeah,
right?
that's great.
We
Yeah.
look at things a
Watch the framing over there, J-Dubs.
a little bit different. So first of all, the 5% is not 5%. So we should stop using the term 5%. The 5% never was 5% because of the topographical layout, because some of it's already industrial or commercial, right? So 5% really isn't 5%. And I'll tell you, I've been having this 5% expansion conversation with Board of Supervisors, Albemarle Board of Supervisors, for a very long time. The good news is they're actually having that conversation at the dais right now.
Yeah.
Before, from my perspective, before that, it was you'd never brought it up, you just didn't do it. I think there's two paths forward that could help. One is a little bit of a low-hanging fruit, which is
Office to residential.
look at the commercial, look at I think there's not a lot of it, but
Yeah.
there's enough of it.
Yep.
Right? And those of us in this field kind of know that market's a little soft right now. So, you could go ahead and take a look at that. And I think reportioning the 5% is something to look at.
Okay, so
you're
reportioning, what he's saying is substituting out pieces of development area for others. Mike Pruitt is pushing this super hard. I do not buy this in any capacity.
Yeah.
He's saying take Rivanna Village, where my former neighborhood, Glenmore, kept development from happening in Rivanna Village, substitute out Rivanna Village that's in the development area with another tract of land and make a tradesy here.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds bananas to me.
Let's go back to
But it's
Keith.
not necessarily, if you excuse me for a second, it's not necessary, sorry guys, we'll end up doing this, so you guys got to stop us. So,
We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah.
worry.
No, let's hear what the fellas have to say about
have
this.
some coffee talk.
Uh-huh.
So I think Fred was onto something. I don't think we have a clear assessment of what's available and what we can do for it.
Right.
Not from a developer's perspective.
Yeah.
We might have it from a land planner's perspective,
Right.
and we might have it from some other perspective. But what do we actually have? What can we do with it, right? So I would be in favor of doing that first and assessing what we have, right?
Yeah,
And-
100%.
And, it's much like the conversation I have with some of my other Board of Supervisors, that are very much so anti-housing, no more housing, and it's okay, great. Well, what's your answer, right? What's your solution?
So Scott and Fred, should we trade out land that's not in the development area for land that is, where development's not happening?
Yeah, I want to go back to Keith's comment, because this is something that I think is really important, and I suppose this probably doesn't follow necessarily in the economic development area. But to your point, this is something I've been very aware of for a while. You drive up and down 29, lots of retail space, and what's happened since COVID, a lot of that retail space has gone kaput, right? And so I think there's significant opportunities where you could look at rezoning some of that commercial space for residential and have it mixed use. You could put, residences in there. You could get some really creative maybe on some affordable housing. There could be coffee shops in there. I mean, like the Fashion Square Mall, the place down by Kroger that's been abandoned for so long. I think there's some really interesting opportunities.
It's very
if you
much so
really-
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I
It's
think
an
it is
easy-
low-hanging
it's
fruit.
an easy
Yeah.
thing. Here's the challenge. Most of those parcels are split up in multiple
Yeah.
parcels. And that's where the mall is one, for example. It's multiple parcels owned by multiple different.
And a lot of people don't realize that the commercial real estate, while vacant, is still under leased, and the
Yeah.
landlords are collecting
That's
rent
right.
rolls.
That's
This is the real estate's how I make my living.
Yeah.
They're vacant, but they're still making money on these vacant spots. Pointed question, talk show. For you, Fred. Do we take land that's not in the development area and trade it out for land that is in the development area, like Supervisor Mike Pruitt is pushing in the Scottsville district?
Yeah, so I'll say this. I will say that land use and real estate is an analog science. It's not a digital science. And to say in a blanket statement, yes, we should do that, I think is not the right thing.
Okay.
I think we have to do what sort of Keith, and I think, Scott, you're also suggesting, and that is look at some of the individual parcels, look at some more detail, capturing a metric that tells us how much developable land is actually in our stock.
So I'm going to jump in here, and because I'm going to twist the question on you a little
Okay.
bit. Should the county do that, or should the county engage professional developers to go ahead and do that? Because there's sometimes very much so differences the way the planning staff looks at something and the way the developers look at it.
Well, they're connected. I mean, you can't really do one or the other. You have to do both together because you've got the regulations that the staff is putting together.
Sure.
You've got the comp plan, the zoning modernization. Those things are saying these are the critical slope areas. These are the floodplains. These are the things that you have to stay away from. So they're defining what the development community can work within. And so I think there has to be some push and pull in both directions. I think the county and the county staff, at least in my experience, is aligned with doing this, with looking at and trying to maximize the development area. And part of that, and I know, Scott, you were talking primarily about housing and trying to find places for 11,000 units, I think you said, of housing, and that there's capacity for that. I think we need to look at it holistically. We can't just say it's about housing because
agreed.
we're definitely looking at needs to diversify our tax base, and that includes the commercial, the retail, and some of the other support.
So looking at the commercial
Yep.
as a low-hanging fruit, we've got
Right.
infrastructure there, right? We've got water there, the traffic is already
We need to get
there.
Scott's take on trading out land outside the development area for land that's in the development area. We haven't gotten his answer on that. He's saying no, or at least.
I'm
he's-
saying we study it.
You're hesitant to do it, is kind of what you're saying.
I'm saying we need to study it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And
It's a
I'm
hard-
not hesitant to study it.
Okay.
I'm ready to study it.
Okay, okay. What's your take on this?
I think to Keith's point, as you're looking at, professionals looking at things, as you're looking at planners looking at things, I'd be willing to look at it on, a use case, but I think right now more people that I'm talking to want to stay inside the area for now, and we can look at it, but, I'm hesitant to do
So
that.
you're a no. You're a no on that.
Going outside?
Yeah, trading land outside the development area for land that's in the development area.
For right now, yeah. I think we
Okay.
need to look at it, but, yeah.
And
So
I am not I actually hate studies for the sake of doing studies.
Yeah.
Except for this one. I think you need to actually do a true assessment. They are trying to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm a unique animal. I got 1 foot in the private sector and 1 foot in the public sector, right? So I can see both sides of the coin. And one of the struggles that I have when I talk to the public sector, they don't really understand what it costs to do something, right?
Yeah.
And it's not their fault, it's just the way they are, right? So when, bringing both of these sides of these tables together, I think is important. And is that something, if you guys are elected, I would be pushing you guys to go ahead and do, because you can't make that decision without the
Right.
data, right?
Well, I'd say one thing, and we experienced this together, I think, when we
We
were
did.
it was up in North Fork, actually.
We did.
We were talking about affordable housing, and we were talking about ways to fund affordable housing, and the supervisors were together with the planning commissioners and the development community.
Yeah.
And you may have actually been the one who sponsored that.
I was the one who pushed that.
Yeah, and I
So
think
it was
those.
about the regular development incentives that
Yes.
Albemarle County was going to do.
And I think those types of meetings are critical, and I don't think they happen, at least I'm not aware of them happening that often.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much time and effort it took to put that together.
I'm sure, and it should be easier than that, right?
That's what
because
I'm
that's and the one thing that I will say about that experience was, at least what I saw in the housing Albemarle, what came out of that discussion fell short of the goal that was set in that discussion. In other words, I felt like there were more, incentives requested by the development community to be able to make the math work in affordable housing than what actually showed up in the Housing Albemarle
So,
document.
Scott, to put a little context to this, this was the developer incentives that Albemarle County was putting together. I sit on the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission and the Regional Housing Partnership, and I noticed they were talking past each other, right?
Sure.
The elected or the governmental bodies and the folks who are actually doing it or talking past each other. So I kind of pushed to put everybody in a room. It didn't quite end up. It was good that we were in the room. What we discussed did not necessarily make it into the ending document. So would you be supportive of that, of having both the private sector and the public sector coming together and having conversations on this?
I mean, absolutely. Remember, I'm a business person,
got it.
40-decade business person. It's all about that. But, actually, we've got a really good example right now, that's relevant to what you guys are asking about, like Dudley Mountain Road. I mean, I don't know, Fred, if you go back to that one, like when they came to the Planning Commission, I mean, what was the dialogue like with those guys? The school. I mean,
We're talking about the forest school.
Yeah,
The private school for Dudley
the forest
Mountain
school,
Road. Israel.
Dudley Mountain Road.
Yeah.
Like when you were sitting there with them at the Planning Commission meeting, how that what was that like?
Well, it was interesting. It was an interesting discussion. That project is kind of a case study, is helpful. And I'll just paraphrase the outcome of that discussion.
Okay.
And that was essentially, number one, there needs to be infrastructure to be able to support developments that are good ideas potentially in the rural area. And that was the biggest sort of test point. That was the biggest concern, was that the infrastructure wasn't there. And the message that was trying to be sent by the Planning Commission was a message to the Board of Supervisors saying this is potentially a very good, a very suitable use in this area. And when you look at the by right, for example, would have created much more traffic on that site. But the message that was being sent was we don't have the infrastructure to support that. There was a swing vote at the last minute at the Planning Commission that changed and it was recommended to the Board of Supervisors for approval. And then, as you know, I think it was 2 nights ago, there was approval of 5-1.
With Diantha McKeel, the only to vote against it.
Diantha was the only person who voted against it, and I spoke to her about that.
Yeah.
And I said, tell me, what was your thinking? And she was very clear, and she said, essentially, we're dealing with a road, a VDOT road, that is not suitable to handle the traffic.
And the environmental concerns.
And the environmental concerns.
So I'm
are
going to
another
jump
big one.
in.
Well, I
As a
have a
side-
question. So how did you vote on that, Fred, at the planning meeting?
So you obviously know that I wasn't in attendance at the Planning Committee meeting.
Oh, okay.
And the reason was I was at an Urban Land Institute conference in Denver.
Okay.
It's an annual conference that's scheduled well in advance. So I've had subsequent conversations with several constituents along Dudley Mountain Road. And there were a couple of emails that I got, to be honest, that really kind of took me aside. I mean, I have pretty thick skin, but I was basically being accused of choosing to not show up, and I very clearly made it the point that that wasn't the case.
You have Lottie Murray's watching the program, multiple planning commissioners
great.
watching the program
Great.
right now.
Awesome.
It was a 5-1 vote. I know this is something that you're trying to utilize here, Scott, which is fine. We can do that. I'll set some context here for the viewers and listeners that don't know. Then Scott, jump in. Dudley Mountain Road, the residents of Dudley Mountain Road significantly opposed this private school coming to their road.
That's right.
And they highlighted environmental concerns, traffic concerns, and safety concerns.
Yep.
This overwhelmingly passed 5-1 with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors with Jim Andrews of the Samuel Miller District highlighting to the media this is one of the most difficult votes that he's had to make.
That's right.
But the Samuel Miller District representative, Jim Andrews, who's not running again, hence why these guys are running, said, I think this is a good idea. I know you have some follow-up here that you want to ask. You can go ahead and do it.
So were you at the meeting on this past week, a couple days ago?
I was not in attendance, but I watched it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, from a business perspective, when I look at things, you have, on one hand, you've got a school. I'm a huge supporter of schools, right? I love education, can change your stars. You've got a very special community. In fact, it's a Jewish community, and they're looking for this forest school, and there's a whole story behind that. And it's a really great story. On the other side of the coin, you've got like 600 residents that had signed petitions not wanting it. it's against going against VDOT in terms of that, the environmental things that you just talked about, water, all of these kinds of things, and it's outside the development area. And I think there was, I mean, you're in the real estate arena. If I had been on the Board of Supervisors, I think you could have engaged in conversation and had, some creative positive outcomes for both sides. I really thought that, it was unfortunate, that it was kind of a win-lose situation. I can certainly envision a win-win situation, and so.
Scott, let me just ask you a question on that, because it was a challenging vote. It was a challenging bit of discussion. Sorry. And, all of the things that you said are 100% accurate. I would ask you, if you were sitting in the seat of a planning commissioner, you mentioned a little bit of it there. You have options in front of you, right? You have the land as is, the land that could potentially go into a conservation easement, the land that could be developed into single-family detached homes by right, and other by right opportunities. So the impacts of the by right opportunities potentially could be greater than the impacts of the known quantity, which is the school. How would you have weighed those two options?
What I would have actually gone to a third scenario, and then this would require having some conversations with both sides to understand how open they were to compromise. But if you step back, I mean, from a real estate perspective, Keith, it's 156 acres in Albemarle County. That's worth a lot. That's a very that's a huge asset that someone generously
Prime
donated,
land.
right?
Yep.
And so, if there was some interest in looking at other spots that had roads that were more able to handle that kind of traffic, you could potentially do, 1031 exchanges, you could do a buy-sell. There's a lot of options that they could have looked at creatively, and my sense is they weren't. And so I could envision a potential win-win situation. I mean, that's why I'd like to be on the board, to help to drive those kind of things. That's the creativity that I brought into my business career. And so, anyway.
Yeah, if I could just, one other thing, I admire that. I think that creativity piece is important. And I had a conversation with Mike Pruitt right before, I guess it was Friday of last week, and we spoke about this because he knew this was coming up.
So what was the by right count, density count?
I don't recall.
3 lots.
Yeah, okay. So we got 100 some odd.
Well, it's 156 acres, but of that 156 acres, 15 acres is developable, and the graphics I could see look like about 3 lots.
So we're only talking about 3 lots, right?
Yeah.
That's what I saw.
So from a development perspective, there's not a lot of value there.
Yeah.
In my opinion, right? There's only, if you're looking, most developers are looking for density. Look, you can carve it up into 3 lots and maybe build rather expensive homes. So really, from a development perspective, there's not a lot of opportunity there.
I would disagree, actually, on that.
Not a residential. Side.
Well, first of all, I'm not necessarily looking at it from a developer's perspective, right? I'm saying there's
The math
value
doesn't
in
work.
that land. A developer might want to buy it. It could be an individual that could buy it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are opportunities where you could get creative and try and find win-win
So
situations.
this conversation is exactly what you guys are going to be doing if you're
Yeah,
sitting.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And they're tough. They're tough
Yeah,
discussions.
That's why I always say land use is like your number one thing, because there's a lot of times not a right answer,
Yeah.
right? This is not a.
Well, I mean,
buy-
you got 500, 600 pissed off Dudley Mountain Road residents right now.
It's.
I
not-
mean, furious with what happened.
And make it personal. One cyclist, because I ride up Dudley Mountain.
As do I.
It is.
It's harrowing.
It is. I would rather ride on 20 than Dudley Mountain Road.
Yeah.
Actually, if you're a cyclist, maybe we should simplify this a little. I'm a cyclist, too.
We just go for a ride.
All right.
Yeah, let's just go for a ride. We'll have a race.
Yeah, but there's a rule on a ride, right? What stays on the ride, what's talked about on the ride stays on the ride.
That's right,
So
that's
we
right.
really be able to.
There's a lot we're going to cover with
But-
time and constraint here. We
but-
got to talk
well, actually-
taxes. There's a lot. We're getting the weeds here, fellas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
We
pull out.
got, I'm just kind of watching the clock, though. You know what? I'm realizing there is a lot for us to talk about. And I'd actually like to propose a debate with Fred. 3 debates. First one being like September 10th or 24th at the Firehouse. Maybe some of the Ruritan folks could
I'd love that.
host. Yeah, that'd be awesome. So, and we could do one in, maybe a couple October.
Just from an execution standpoint, doing debates in areas where they're not live stream is not the best for community engagement. If you want to do a debate on a platform where everyone can reach in real time or on demand, I'm happy to host it. But if you do a debate at the Ruritan or the Firehouse, and I'm not throwing shade, you're going to have 30 people show up.
Well,
Yeah, I
guys,
think
there might be
about this in
news
the
coverage.
past.
We
I
have,
think,
yeah.
I mean, I
There
think
was
the
like
secret.
50 people
The
there.
secret sauce about
Yeah.
what Jerry's talking
I mean,
about.
we literally have every media outlet watching. We have 24 questions that we haven't even gotten to, and it's 11 o'clock here.
And
They can watch it on demand at their time.
There you go.
Whenever they want. Like
It is
Netflix.
amazing.
We'll do 5 debates, and we'll start with 3.
Why
Give
don't
more opportunities.
We can also
but-
talk about this offline and
Sure.
strategize on the best way to do that.
We have to talk, and I'm trying to keep the tempo here with the questions. What's the fiscal year 2026 budget for Albemarle County? 644 million, roughly.
42,
Yeah.
I think.
642 million.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head.
Yep.
That number continues to escalate. Explain to me how the number continues to escalate when assessments in Albemarle County have upticked since COVID. What, 45%? There's plenty of incremental revenue there because of the assessments. The real estate tax rate just jumped, what, 4 cents?
yeah, we're 49.6% up
4
since
cents?
2019.
What's the number?
49.6%
Okay.
up.
For assessments.
Assessments,
Well,
yeah.
assessments should track the market.
Yeah.
That's a market rate.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
Taxes
that's-
haven't moved, but assessments have.
Yeah. So assessments are up, real estate tax rate is up, budget is up. How's the average Joe keeping up here? Isn't the policy from the supervisors gentrifying the community quickly? How do we keep that from happening? What's the take on, Scott, go first. Tax rate, what are you going to do if you're elected with the real estate tax rate?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the not only current state, right? Because we obviously just had a big one, but you take the slides from the town hall meetings, before it went to 642 million, and their expenses are projected to be higher than revenue. My goal, as I said a little earlier, is to bring that business perspective, that financial discipline. We need to hold the line. My perspective is hold the line on the spend, right?
Where do you cut?
Yeah.
Well, the key is actually there's surpluses that are out there that you could leverage,
That's
right?
exactly
So I don't think you have to cut necessarily. I mean, once you get in and deeper and you could look at it, but right now in the short term, there's surpluses that you could leverage.
But some of those surpluses can only go to certain places, right? So you got to be a little careful about exactly how you can disperse.
Yeah,
those
you're right. I mean,
surpluses
the
and stuff
percentage,
like
10% has
Yeah.
to go to the bond
Yeah.
fund,
Got
et
it,
cetera,
got
et
it,
cetera.
got
But there's money there that you can
Sure,
work with.
sure.
You're talking $642 million, right? So basically, my goal is to bring financial discipline to that conversation and hold the line. And I would be fighting. I mean, I'll give you another example. This is someone that I talked to. He does small engine repair, right? And he's telling me that from a small business perspective, he's got to go and inventory all his tools every
Yeah.
time he gets a new tool. He has got to pay for the personal property tax. I mean, there's a lot of barriers, and that's a whole conversation we could get into. And we probably don't have time, but. If we look at opportunities to enable business, I don't think we're a business-enabled county necessarily in terms of the way that we're looking at things.
So very curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. It's challenging. I know that everybody is feeling the pinch with the increase in taxes. Had lots of conversations with folks at the county about this to try to understand it more fully. And where I started was to try to understand the process and the process of actually creating the budget and what that looks like. And then also, and as a business person also, we go through audits. We see audits a lot. So what is the discipline that is being taken at the county to ensure that the funds are being spent appropriately and are in line with the strategic plan? So I've learned a lot about it. One is I think rigor is absolutely necessary. 100% agree with that. And I think if you're setting a county budget and you're not looking carefully at every cent that comes in, then you're not serving your constituents well. So that's 100% really just kind of a basic given.
And then you have a pressure from a guy like me that's looking for $10 million for affordable housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I think when you think about that, so I'd start with one thing. We'll get to affordable housing as that, and another, and diversifying the tax base. I think the other piece of it is, when you look at the 4 cents, to your question, what do you cut, right? The 4 cents went to schools, to affordable housing, and to public safety. So
Fire
those
and
are
rescue.
Fire and rescue. So those are hard things to cut, right? And part of the reason that money is being increased is because there are federal funding cuts that they're having to adjust to, right? And over time, they're going to time out. So in 2021, I believe that there were somewhere, since 2021, we've hired somewhere around 90 or 95 firemen, and those are being funded by SAFER grants, and those SAFER grants will time out. So the county has to figure out a way to work within this volatile and ever-changing environment.
That's called
to
economic
figure out-
development.
Yeah, and so moving on to economic development.
that's how you do it.
So that's exactly right. So when you think about, we've talked a lot about capacity for housing, et cetera. I think finding ways to diversify the income so that it's not just from property taxes, but it's also from commercial areas, I think is the way to go.
Well, you guys are around 30%. My poor little county is not even hit 10%, Fluvanna County. So our
Albemarle County's
economic
Albemarle
development?
County taxes tied to business is 12%.
It's 12%.
And Albemarle County is trying to get it to 17%. That was the economic development director on this set told us it was 12%, and they wanted to get it to 17%. That's a huge swing, 5%.
It is a huge swing. And there's a lot of differences right now in economic development at the county. Very different than it has been over the past 10 years or even the last 3 years or so. There's been a major change. I just want to mention one other thing about rigor related to taxes. And it doesn't come up a lot, but it's something that's important to take a look at, and that's the Strategic Plan Execution and Accountability Report, or the SPEAR report. So what the county does after they complete the work on the budget is every year, annually, they use that SPEAR report, which actually takes a look at their priorities and combines it and looks at how they're doing and how their funding is working along those lines. So that's a really helpful, I think, tool.
Can I ask pointed questions that are going to help us with time? If you're elected, Scott Smith, will you raise the real estate tax rate in the 4 years that you're on the dais? Will you vote to raise the real estate tax rate?
I'm opposed to putting more squeeze on people. I mean, let me just give you a quick example. Like Mr. Johnson's like about a mile from me as the crow flies, right? He's on land that he inherited from his grandfather. He's 70-something years old. There's a lot of people that know I don't want to raise taxes.
Okay.
I want to be more efficient with the taxes that we have.
So you're a hard no.
Yeah, but it's there's even nuances to it, right? It's not just raising taxes, because Keith brought up the rising assessments, right? So the costs are going to go up no matter what.
100%.
There's a lot of people, like Vivian, who was at Esmont, in the town hall meeting, that I sat fairly close to her, and she starts going through all the things that are, her rent, not her rent, her home insurance, her groceries. I mean, there's a whole set of people that are getting squeezed.
You are pricing out people that have been here for a long time.
Forever.
Yeah.
You're pricing out the people that serve us.
That's right. And you're pushing them and they're going to have to go farther and farther out.
We joke around that you
Yeah.
used to drive to qualify. I think now you fly to qualify. But I want to put some context.
Can
to
we
that.
get Fred's answer on that? If he's elected, the real estate tax rate, would you vote yes to raise it or no to, if you're elected in 4 years?
I would have to think about it. I would not actually say yes or no. I think if you do say a hard yes or a hard no, it's short-sighted and you're not taking into consideration all the variables that are currently out there.
I'm going to ask a question that should be an easy yes or no question, but I'm going to frame it a little bit. So, as the chair of the Piedmont Community Land Trust, 80% AMI right now is for two people is a little over $80,000,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The maximum amount that 80% AMI buyer can buy, the value of a home, is $275. Albemarle County, you can't buy anything for under $475. So there's a $200,000
Yeah.
shortfall that, as a land trust, we go out and beg for money. So we'll be in front of you guys begging for money. But one of the things that I think could help this housing question is turning red tape into green tape. I talk about this all the time on the show, right? It takes forever to get a project approved, even by right stuff.
Yeah.
So will you gentlemen be willing to look at that and reduce that down instead of years, go back to months? I tell this story all the time. The first development I did took me 6 months from acquisition to put a bulldozer in a job site.
Yeah.
I'm part of one right now that's in year 8, and we haven't even put a bulldozer on the job site. The bottom line is that goes to the 475.
Absolutely.
So would you be willing to reduce red tape into green tape, help projects that are by right, gone through the process already,
Of course,
and not
they
get
will.
hung up?
Abs-
But
Yeah, but
Jerry,
there's
it's important
nuances.
because it's not happening. Right
Yeah,
now.
so there's nuances. This is really big. I mean, this like leads back to that example of the guy that took 8 years to get bays on his repair business,
Yeah.
right? So absolutely, I would be very focused on trying, and that's on my whole background. That's what I did for 40 years, in terms of helping improve efficiency in organizations. So absolutely. But I want to give like an example, like a micro example of what you're just talking about, right? Like one of the guys that I just talked to 2 weeks ago runs a foundation company, and he was telling me there's a $5,000 tax on every new home that's built in Albemarle County. And I'm like, what do you mean? Explain that to me. And what he was saying was that he's one of the first things that happens, or close to, early laying a foundation, right? So they go out and they have to call, like the day before they want somebody to come out. So they call, person comes out, and he said, let's say they need some changes. Like, okay, can I ask them to wait and we'll do it real quick? No. What happens is you have to wait. You fix it, and then you wait till the next day, call them again, and then they'll show up maybe the following day, right?
That's just lucky.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's the example that he gave me. But one of the things we talked about, back to creativity, you could get someone, you could have people, private, sector folks, on a residential project that you could acquire, and they could just say, hey, can you stick around for a couple minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, I'll fix
The way
this.
around that is a lot of jurisdictions that do some work out west where you hire third parties.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. But that's not allowed today, right? But you could allow
let
it.
Fred jump in
is
here for a minute, but I want to context this real quick. I just had a conversation yesterday with 2 city council members. And I'm very public, the zoning is the zoning, but it's the implementation portion of it.
Yeah.
They won't push staff to make the changes.
Yeah.
The thing is, the Board of Supervisors, you are their bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys willing to push the staff to turn this red tape into green tape?
So I'll share a couple of thoughts on it. I think whatever our answer is, it needs to be a realistic answer. And having been part of this for the last 35 years, in the seat as an applicant, right, I've seen the time that it takes to get something done. In order to add residential to one of our projects, it took 3 years. And I won't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the right to actually build residential, to support the community, affordable housing. And so the challenge that you have is that the staff is currently being leaned on. There is, if you think about it, the way to attack
Did you say
this,
leaned on?
Leaned on. The way to attack this is to think of it in really, I'd say 2 or 3 ways. One is think about process. Second is think about staffing efficiencies. And then the third is to think about expediting projects that are front and center and important critically from a strategic planning standpoint in the county. So starting briefly with the process, we're going through a comprehensive plan rewrite and a zoning ordinance modernization. Both of those, one of the key factors and the key goals was to simplify it. And having read through zoning ordinances here in the past and been through that process, they were really crazy, very, very complex. And it's been simplified. And so there's been a win there. So as a developer, as somebody in the community who's looking to do something to bring economic development, whatever it is, to the community, it's a simpler process. The other is through zoning ordinance modernization and thinking about that. And all the subjects we're talking about are not siloed. They're all interconnected, and I think we need to accommodate that.
Well, comp plans are inspirational at best. It's the zoning that matters.
It's the zoning. The one thing that I'll also add is the expedited project piece. So,
I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, so there's some processes where I've seen the county expedite economic development process.
Scott?
So, I have a lot of background in process, and I think, just at the micro level, I can, speaking for myself and what I had to go through and how many trips I had to make personally down, going through a deck permitting process, it's not simplified. It's very complex. There's a lot of gaps. Just in that, I can see tremendous opportunities for improvement. Good people in those spots, but process and staffing, and there's definitely a bunch of challenges.
It's a leadership problem, to be frank with you. But,
Okay.
I
I can speak to that from the user perspective. It was incredibly disappointing.
Yeah, I think it's also a volume question. So the number of applications that are coming before the county and the staffing. It was interesting. I learned that there's 6 new police officers, as we know, that have been hired or will be hired. And there were actually 12 total FTEs that have left the county. So really there was a net loss.
You might want to
of
explain what
staffing.
an FTE is.
Full-time equivalent, so employees basically that have left. So that was surprising to me. I didn't realize that there were 12 that either had left usually by attrition and not been backfilled. And the conversation I had was, how do we say that we're trying to actually expedite things? How are we trying to move things forward and make it less expensive for a developer to go through the process at the county? How are we able to do that and also cut staff? right? So the reality of it is we need staff to do this. And I'm sure there maybe are some efficiencies within that.
One solution to that is the third-party solution.
Yeah, and we use that. So one big
We don't
area
use it
is,
as well as we should. in my
right.
opinion.
I think where that's being used mostly is in building permits.
Correct.
Building permits right now can be reviewed by a third party,
And I know it
stamped by
works
an
'cause
engineer, and approved by the county.
I'm
And that
part of-
helps.
I'm part of a national cohort that does that out in Seattle and Portland.
Yeah,
And
but
they
like
use third
the,
party.
the gentleman that lays foundations, he has that concrete company. I mean, he was pretty, and we were talking residential at the time. He was pretty clear to me that's something he would love to see in Albemarle County. Doesn't, and he's the one that said it's tack $5,000 onto everyone. And the reason he said that, he was talking about the cost of his crew for 2 days.
Sure.
That's the cost that he was talking about.
Data
Yeah.
centers as a form of economic development. Where do you guys stand on that?
Great question.
Scott, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I will say, I mean, I'm tech, right? I've been around data centers for a very long time. I haven't heard anyone in all the conversations I've talked to that has an interest in it. I mean, there are some places that you could put them and maybe keep them away from residential areas, but I have heard a lot of pushback.
So
And my
Scott,
goal-
no on data centers for economic development.
I would represent the people of Samuel Miller, and I'm hearing that they don't want them.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need to open the lens a little bit further. And yes, we would represent Samuel Miller, but we also have to be thinking about the entire county. The fact is that data centers bring significant amount of revenue to a county. There's an interim ordinance that says 40,000 square foot data centers can be done. The question is not so much should data centers come to the county and should we stop them from coming. If we put up a wall and say absolutely no data centers, period, I'm not sure we're being realistic. I think we need to think through the process and we need to think through environmental impacts, et cetera. So somewhere, there's a number. I know the Board of Supervisors a couple nights ago was talking about a 500,000 square foot data center, and that being potentially done by a right. I think that's excessive, far, far beyond what I would
What's
recommend.
the power that's going to take one of those?
Exactly
The
right.
water.
Yeah,
The water.
exactly.
That's the more concern.
So,
the
and
light
there are,
pollution.
yeah, and there are, small modular reactors that are being talked about now, things that are more sort of self-contained to help power up these data centers.
That's very common. That discussion is very common in Louisa County right now.
I
And
bet,
now the
I
county
bet.
residents are pushing back on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
About $12 billion in Louisa County, according to Amazon. And now Louisa County residents have said enough is enough.
Well, and people are also saying that renewable energy, we need to build solar so that we can power up data centers. But solar is not going to solve our problem with the
Solar's
power
not
needs
gonna
of data
generate
centers.
enough
No
to-
way. There's no way. So we need to be thinking creatively about that. So would I say no to data centers? I would say where would the data center go first? And then I think we would have a conversation about it.
So potentially opposite on this, data centers for economic development, the two candidates. How about this question? Who do you guys represent first, the Samuel Miller District or Albemarle County as a whole?
Great question.
That is a good question. I'll go first on that one. It would be Samuel Miller District, for sure. And I've had conversations with some of the supervisors about this issue. And so, yes, my allegiance would be the Samuel Miller District.
The
And my-
largest district in Albemarle County and the most affluent district in Albemarle County, the Samuel Miller District.
And the most rural district in
Yep.
Albemarle County. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you can't just go into a Board of Supervisors meeting myopically. You can't just be thinking about, I am here just to represent this, because one person on the Board of Supervisors is not going to make any change. It takes the whole board to make change. So as you think through, yes, I'm representing my district. If an issue comes up and it's in my district and another Board of Supervisors learns about it, I would expect that board member to come to me and say, hey, just want you to know this is happening in your district. And that would be that sort of intercommunication and collaboration that I would expect from the other supervisors. But yes, Samuel Miller first. I think we also have to think holistically about what's good for the county in that context.
Scott?
So I'd be representing Samuel Miller, but I agree with your comment about there's six folks on the board, but one person, particularly from a business perspective, at the board they talk a lot about diversity, and I think they could use some diversity with a business perspective on the board. And so if one person in those conversations, a seat at the table, could make a significant difference. To Fred's point, that's one vote, right? But you can have significant influence in that one position. And
Usually one vote matters in
yeah, a
very
vote,
tough.
yeah,
tough
particularly. I mean,
It can.
it
It
could
is
split
sway vote.
3. You know, it could split 3-3, and that one vote makes a really big
So
difference.
I wanted to throw that out there. Is any appetite for changing the count from 6 to 7 or back to 5? I'm not a fan of even boards at all for that very reason.
Yeah.
It gives the no vote one extra vote.
I mean, I'm not a fan either, because to be honest, in some cases, I think it may be used
Sure.
as a way to say no.
Yeah.
You know, being part of a 7-person planning commission, I've seen that to me at least, and this is just Fred speaking, that seems to work more efficiently and be more representative. I'd love to talk to somebody who's an advocate for a 6-person board of supervisor. Just even, yeah, I'm with you on
Scott?
that.
I'd have to think about that. I mean, my question in the back of my mind is what's in the best interest of the
Sure.
some of the Samuel Miller folks. So, I mean, I'd have to think about it.
Yeah, so simply put, if there's something that the Samuel Miller District wants, and it's a tie vote, then it's a no vote. So
That's
they-
right.
so
I
they-
understand.
So
Yeah.
they lose it. I'm a fan of it because it forces the board to have a conversation.
An extra vote on the board of supervisors is not going to happen. It's not going to happen during their time. It's not going to happen in my.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I don't
Yeah,
see
This
that
is
as
a pipe dream.
I don't see it as a
Yeah.
near-term thing. That's a
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
That's a big.
That would
I
be
mean,
creating an at-large seat.
those districts
right.
are set up, based on census data.
100%,
And so
100%.
that's
You're
a
not going to chop
complex.
the districts down. Pointed questions for both guys here. Pointed question for Fred. How are you going to navigate being employed by UVA and representing Albemarle County?
Oh, yeah. No, thanks for asking that question. And, you know, I'll think of it in a couple different ways. One is, yes.
Because you're the largest developer in Albemarle County.
Well, yeah, I think so.
Landowner.
If you think that's true, if you think about the University of Virginia too, and you think about the University Foundation, absolutely, there's a large impact there. I would say this. One is, and I don't want this to at all sound defensive because I don't feel defensive about it. I've been grateful to be a part of the University of Virginia Foundation. I've learned a ton, and I feel like it's prepared me for this role, to be honest with you. I have had, I bet you I could count them on the either one hand or maybe two hands, times where I've felt conflicts of interest or either had real conflicts that affected my interaction with the county. I think people think it happens all the time, but it's extremely rare.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's really more of a benefit to have been part of that. And whenever, I will say this, and hopefully this goes without saying because it's a question about integrity, if there's ever a whiff of a potential conflict, I will recuse myself. And anybody can look at my record and see that I've done that. I've had a couple of issues or a couple of situations where applicants have come forward and I've been like, this one feels like it might potentially be a conflict. And if that happens, I'll go to the county attorney and I'll say, what do you think? And I'll get his input and I'll actually get that in writing and then I'll make a determination. And obviously if he says, yeah, I'd recommend against it, I will not be part of it. So there's no question that is the case. And again, you can check my record. What it has done, though, which is really interesting, is it's helped me in terms of several ways. One is resilience. So Resilient Together, I've been part of the conversations between the city, the county, and the university on that. Another one would be affordable housing, the initiative that we're working on right now, learning more about that and being part of the community there. There are numerous examples that I could give. I won't ramble on, but where I've been through the process of learning as part of this, and I really would commit to retaining as a supervisor the relationships, the strong relationships with the city, the county, and the university, and trying to strengthen them even further. I had a conversation with our mayor, Juan Wade, at some coffee. We had coffee a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this, and we talked about how those relationships are becoming stronger. And one of the ways that is really, and this is my last point, really a tangible way, is a group called LUPEC, which is the Land Use Environmental Planning Committee. And I'm a part of that, and so is the city, so is the county, so is the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority. And we all come together and we talk about issues that impact all 3 or 4, I guess it's 5 now, of those groups. And it's a spin-off of the original 3-party agreement that the city, the county, and the university had. So I find it as a you know, a benefit, actually.
Pointed question for Scott. Scott Smith, you're new to the area.
Yep.
What's your
Well, 5 years. Yeah.
What's your response to the folks saying 5 years is not enough of time in the area to have a seat on the Board of Supervisors?
So I would say that
Because that's some pushback I'm hearing. I heard the pushback on Fred with UVA Foundation.
Sure.
I asked it direct to him. Same kind of pushback I hear for you.
So I think what you need to look at is what will I bring to the table? I mean, I made a choice to move here 5 years ago, fell in love with a rural area, have been an election official, gotten engaged in the community, Samaritan's Purse. It's exciting. But I think the bigger thing is how often do you get someone that's been very successful in the high-tech business, the most transformative business of our century, that's willing to spend their time, basically take a full-time job at essentially, nothing, getting paid to commit to serve this community for 4 years. And that business perspective and the financial discipline that I would bring to bear, I think is priceless that could be added to the board.
So from my perspective, to have two business background folks
Yeah.
running for the seat is a good thing, right? Enterprise software, who uses a lot of enterprise software? Governments, right?
Yeah.
So if
In
you're,
any large entity.
yeah, so you bring a skill set to
And
that.
process.
And process.
Process is big.
Land use is the number one thing, right? Some land use experience on Fred's side. So I'm encouraged that you're going to try to bring some business thinking to the Board of Supervisors. One who deals with them for 40 years, it is very difficult to change that
Yeah, yeah,
ship.
yeah.
It is an aircraft carrier, right? If you put it in neutral, it'll drift for a very long period of time. So I wish you gentlemen the best of luck. This was an awesome
Yeah,
conversation.
we didn't even cover, I got 24 comments from viewers and listeners and voters that we didn't get to.
So-
we didn't talk about learning from the new zoning ordinance debacle in Charlottesville to make sure it doesn't happen in Albemarle County. We didn't get to meals tax, lodging tax. We didn't get to, so much we didn't get to, and we went 15 minutes over.
So I'll throw this on the table.
Yeah.
This is not a debate. This is a conversation. If you two ever want to come back and address some of those questions on my show, seats are always available.
Great,
I think
thank
it's
you.
important that we continue having a direct dialogue. A debate format's a little bit different, obviously.
It should be a
Yeah, I
debate
appreciate
format
that.
with organized times, is what I would suggest. But you guys killed it. I want to say this. You guys are willing to put yourself out there at a time where you could say that our country and our community is more divided than ever.
Absolutely.
To do a job where half the people are going to hate what you're voting on and the other half
Yep.
are not even going to know what's going on or care about it. And you're going to do it for next to no money, well below minimum wage. The anti-entrepreneur in a lot of ways is working in government. And I respect both of you for pursuit of civic engagement and trying to leave your community in a better position than when you first arrived. And that's your mission here. That's
It
why
is.
both you
That's what
guys
it
are
comes
both
down to.
motivated by that. So I respect both of you guys. Thank you for joining us on this show.
Thank you for the
Absolutely,
time.
Jerry. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Keith.
It takes a lot of guts to sit in that seat, so well done.
Yeah, for the
Thanks.
print, radio, and television watching the program, feel free to source the show for any content you want to create for your news cycles. For the viewers and listeners that we did not get to your comments, the voters, I apologize. We've run out of time. The show is going to be archived in totality wherever you get your social media or podcasting platform, literally on every single one of them right now. That's the Friday edition of Real Talk with Keith Smith. The I Love CVille show, guys, is up at 12:30. Thank you for joining us so long.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
Thanks
you.
for your service.
Oh, thank you.
That was incredible.
Thanks,
Fred.
Yeah,
It's
good
to
job,
see you.
man.
Yeah.
You too.
Great job.
Jerry, thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you, Jerry.
Well done, Fred.